So welcome everyone to this webinar, Building a Diverse Pool of Candidates Using DE&I Technology. My name is Francesca, as indicated, and I am SIA Analyst and moderator for today's webinar. So really, research does show that companies that hire from a more diverse pool of candidates create a much better and have a much better an overall strategic advantage. According to Ceipal, 90% of organisations say seeking diverse candidates is a top priority. So how can staff and firms intentionally champion diversity and inclusion and get the very best talent for their clients? Over the next hour during this webinar, we will identify steps to attract more diverse candidates, establish a stronger hiring practice in order to ultimately meet organisations' corporate diversity goals. So let's crack on with the task at hand, so to speak, and I'm really delighted to be joined by Samir Penkalapati, CEO and founder of Ceipal. Samir is a serial entrepreneur who is dedicated to advising and investing in technology startups, specifically in the HR and AI space. Samir's key interests include talent acquisition, talent engagement, and total talent management. As a regular contributor and thought leadership pieces to the HR publications, Samir was recently inducted into the Forbes HR Council and to date has received numerous awards, including accolades from Rochester Top 100, Deloitte's Fast 100, but obviously most importantly, SIA's Fastest Growing Companies report. We are also joined by James Lucier, and Jim is Executive President and responsible for leading Ceipal's DE&I go-to-market strategies. He drives MSP and staffing and client success within building a more diverse, equitable and inclusive workforce. He's actually going to be available for Q&A later on and some discussion towards the end of the presentation. So just to really discuss our pre-registration poll, which we asked all of you, the question was, how important is DE&I in your organisation? Taking a look yesterday, we had over 230 respondents who said it was extremely important. Around 60 cited it was relatively important, with a handful that said it's really not even on their radar. So Samir and Jim, really, it's not surprising the amount that have indicated how that is extremely important, because obviously they're all present on this webinar, so that's fantastic. But can you tell us what you're seeing in the shift in customer sentiment? Are organisations taking this a little bit more seriously this time around?
Yeah, Fran, I can comment on that. We've been working with dozens of numerous corporate clients to large MSPs and the large staffing firms across. This is the point and topic of the discussion. And more importantly, just one quick stat is last 2 years, there are more of U.S. corporations are publicly publicly announcing their DEI stats and data. And they're anticipating that the number from 50% to 80% of the Fortune 1000 corporations are going to publicly announce their DEI initiatives and their future plan for the next 2 to 5 years. So it is the most important topic, and everyone realizing that there's something needs to be done. And I think it's a great topic that we're planning on talking about it today.
I would just agree with that and say I think that, specifically over the last year or so, this has moved from a nice to do to we must do. And there's really now a business mandate for diversity, equity, and inclusion across the enterprise, from large to small organizations.
Yeah, and I can concur all the above. From an analyst's perspective, I definitely get more requests on DE&I than I do markets at the moment, so that's for sure. So yeah, we're delighted to be here and discussing this topic with you all. So just to go through a very brief agenda, we're going to discuss a business case, DE&I and contingent workforce, not only overall, barriers to success and where we can assist there, and then obviously Samir will be discussing their roadmap to building a more diverse workforce. So with that really, it's sort of pretty evident now that there is a growing body of research that does support the business case, that organisations that embrace cultural diversity, equity and inclusion thrive, while those that do not or struggle to are consistently at a disadvantage. A long-term study by McKinsey, as well as research that SIA has carried out, indicate that DE&I is stronger than ever. For diverse companies, the likelihood of outperforming peers, here as indicated on the graph, has increased over time, with the penalties getting steeper for those who do not, in essence. So the study does show that companies in the top quartile for executive team diversity were 25% more likely to experience above average financial performance than the peers that are in the bottom quarter there. And actually, a bigger positive outcome is applied with respect for ethnic diversity. So companies in the top quartile there are having an experience 36% more financial performance than their peers in the fourth quarter. So there's definitely no arguments there. And this has actually been seen year on year, an increasing benefit, and then those who do not adhere are actually having an increase in decline in profitability. So this is just not just a yearly thing, this is an ongoing trend. So these are findings from our Workforce Solutions Biosurvey that we conduct every year. We really do ask our clients, what kind of workforce strategies you have in place now and what you're looking to have in the future, ranging from 64% in Americas and 53% in EMEA. There is a program of diversity suppliers in place now, with approximately 30% in both regions looking to really explore this within the next 2 years. However, what I do find more interesting, actually, if you look further down in the graph, is that only 24% currently have a program that aligns contingent workforce to their diversity goals. But if you do see, nearly 60% will seriously be exploring this in the next 2 years. So it's not only going to be happening in overall workforce, but it's going to be happening in the contingent space. And it's definitely going to be seriously explored. So don't say we haven't warned you. In SIA's specific report, The Future of Diversity and Inclusion in the Contingent Workforce, we very much like McKinsey, we do show that DE&I leaders experience superior outcomes across all examined factors. However, when we start to look at why the laggards feel that their organisations are not successful, with the exception of the first point there, which was lack of corporate mandate, at 60%, the remaining three there, with excluding co-employment anxiety, really does boil down to a lack of diversity data, with 57% citing limited information from staffing partners as a barrier to why they feel that they are unsuccessful. And I think this is a great segue into the presentation, and I think Samir will be able to sort of try and put into practice some areas to mitigate this for you. Samir, over to you.
Thanks, Fran. I think it's important for observe the last slide, 2 data points. If I had to pick out of the 4, number 1 is obviously the lack of corporate mandate. That has been changing. As we said, 50% of the US corporations are currently putting their DEI information on their website, the public sites, and then the rest of them are following suit in the next few years. So that's a shift is happening now. And the second most important factor was people, the contingent workforce or the full-timers, especially if it's a large corporation, have thousands of employees. It's an optional opt-in or to self-identify their gender or ethnic information. And there is no way we would know it, what's a spread at the organizational aggregate level that we have it. So we were thinking of how do we do that, right? There's a mandate you can force to someone to identify their information. It's just optional. And at the same time, we have another side mandate is let us improve our diversity and in gender workforce stats in the organization. So just 2 are contradicting each other. One, you can't get the information. Another, you really has to, improve our numbers. So we look into these things, and obviously there's one way to solve is technologically we can do it, and that's what we're going to talk about. So we kind of outlined three, where this is not something like a quick fix scheme, like hey, use this tool, you're going to fix the data. That's not how it works. It's a process that you're going to build over time, and then technology and tools that's going to help you to build it. We're going to look at all the three steps we're talking about. So let me explain the top three steps is assess, plan, and implement. The first step as an assess is basically let us assess our current diversity workforce, right? But again, we don't have the data with us. How are we going to assess it, right? So we built a diversity algorithm. It's an AI built diversity algorithm. So not going to too technical about how we build the algorithm, how it works, but in behind the scenes is basically it utilizes the social linguistics to extract semantics to identify their cultural origins of the names, and then basically pulls data based on your first name, last name, and the location of the candidate. Data is the information for gender-specific information. We could get accuracy to 80 to 90%. Diversity accuracy is almost 70 to 75%. So that's a large amount of certain data that you have that you can really plan and actually start assessing it to where we stand today, right? Either you take your contingent workforce, or if you have a talent pool of candidates, and then you want to support your MSPs or your direct customers, you need to know what's the whole mix of prospective talent that you have in your databases. The one way is to really assess it, right? How do you assess it? So our diversity algorithm will help. There are tools like AI diversity algorithm, that the one we built the technology, it helps you identify what percentage of the candidates are gender specific, like with 90% accuracy, and about 70 to 75% accuracy. It gives you some kind of a diversification background, whether Asians, Hispanics, and African Americans, and white, and different segments that we could get the information. So that way you could just make that one first assessment, understand where we stand today, and then come to the plan. Two is how do we plan it? What's our goals are? And in fact, we're going to showcase to you a couple of the publicly traded large US corporations, how actually they are publishing their DEI goals. And that's the planning, right? Okay, this is what we want to achieve in the next 4 or 5 years. How are we going to do that? And then third one is like, how do you really implement? We show you what's the technology out there that can help you really build that diverse talent workforce. So if you look into this, the step one, we talk about assessing gender and ethnic diversity, right? Either you're a staffing firm, you have 100,000 prospective potential candidates that you have a database, for an example. Then you want to know how diversify the set of candidates you have in that pool, because if you are part of the program through your MSP or through a customer, and then if you are mix, you don't know the background of the mix of the prospective list of candidates, or you consistently prospecting a new set of candidates, it's good to know. Otherwise, I think, when you start supporting your customers' DEI goals, you don't have the baseline to look into it. So for this case, in step one, if you have all of us know your first name, last name, and the location they are, just as simple as that data, you just funnel that data information to the AI diversity algorithm. The algorithm, with a good amount of certainty, gives the gender specific information. Like right now, we have either male or female information on a candidate, and then we have these 4 ethnic backgrounds of African Americans, white, Asian, and Hispanic, Latino. So give you that information with 75% accuracy levels. So it's an aggregate level. I just want to make sure that you get this information at an aggregate level. Let's say if you have 100,000 candidates, then you put through this information, gives you a nice mix of analytics about like how this group looks like. And that gives you a good idea of whether are you on track of building your diverse pool of candidates. If you don't have a good amount of diversity with a good amount of certainty, then you make efforts towards improving those goals. So we talk about different sources of the data, the talent coming into the organization, and how you can improve and make things better. But look at this, as simple as that you have names and locations of the candidates, fits the data to the diversity algorithm. It gives you gender and ethnic diversity information, right? And that information gives you a kind of a baseline for you. Okay, here is how we are looking like, and this is how our data looks like. What can we do? How can we improve it? If you have an opportunity to improve in those spaces. And that's the number one thing that you need to have to assess your baseline data.
If you wanted to have your say, which of the following DE&I metrics would you find most valuable to measure? So A, we have gender diversity, B, ethnic, 3, pay equity, role equity, and E, all of the above. So we'll just give that a few moments, I think about a minute there. And Riley, if you let me know when we have some data in, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, and I think we would like to talk a little bit about, Fran, here, why we asked this question. As you rightly said, we like to know what's the most important aspect of building the diversity. We cannot solve all problems all at once, but we can focus on few that's important for the organization, the corporation, and it can focus on solving it. So here, how this diversity algorithm can actually give you a simple metrics and data points that helps you to focus on those 1 or 2 important aspects of solving the DEI problem.
And I do think also, Samir, it's important to note that each organisation's on their different path, and that some are right at the beginning of this trajectory, and some are not. So it's obviously really important that we get a good overview at this stage. So we do have some results that have come through, so I will go through these now. And it seems we do have a bit of a greedy lot on the call today, with 60% nearly wanting all of the above. So 12% really would like more ethnic diversity data, 7% pay, and then equally on 3% role and gender diversity. So is that what you're hearing from your clients there, Samir? Do they want it all?
That's very true, and this sentiment same with all across the board that we hear. It's not just about just either gender parity or ethnic parity, and the companies do want to look into it. The areas where they can, how do we just do, again, if you look at the data, some areas they want to bring more gender parity, and some parts of their organization they want to bring more ethnic parity. So in all of the above is kind of okay. It's not a one fix for a corporation, but it has to look into different variances at different, either organization level, regional level, or location specific or department specific. So this is the sentiment reflects what we see in the market today.
Yeah, if I could just add a comment, Fran. Yeah. I think there is a bit of irony here, but first of all, the first point I'd like to make is that diversity alone really isn't enough, right? I mean, equity and inclusion has to be a part of it. But I think the irony here is that if you talk to most buyers, if you talk to most MSPs, if you talk to most staffing firms, or maybe if we had another poll question, and I know we don't have this one, but if that question was, which of the DEI metrics do you actually have right now? for the contingent workforce. In a lot of cases, it might be none of the above. You know, I think that's, and that's really what I think we'll highlight as Samir takes a look at some of the metrics that we can develop.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. And yeah, I would like to showcase some of the metrics that that you can get out of you know, from the diversity algorithm getting this data out. And I was just looking at the chart questions, non-binary. You know, this is basically, I just want to make a quick comment. It's an algorithm. It's a computer algorithm. So computer algorithm relies the data based on the names, which is the input data. So it does not have, it identifies either a male or female candidate gender based on you know, the semantics that we built into the algorithm with 90% accuracy levels. And this then non-binary numbers are something that corporations that take this data and then work through it and improve on it. Again, this gives you a baseline for that. I just want to answer that question that I saw in the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Samir. We've had quite a few questions actually about LGBTQ community and non-binary as well. So yeah, thank you for.
Okay. And then we look into this data. Imagine you have the first name, last name, location. Just for that alone, let's take a look into these 4 categories of the data. And then when the algorithm crunches the data information, gives back to you this information at a very aggregate level. That's very important. You would never get the data on an individual or get an aggregate level, because that way it's you know, we're trying to solve the organizational level data and the DEI, bringing the parity across the board, either the gender specific or the ethnic specific parity, right? So if you look into this, if let's say if you have an organization has 20,000 employees, you put the data across through the algorithm, gives you reports like this, okay? Gives you gender diversity, you know, male and female. Again, non-binary wasn't an option because data, you were feeding the data of the names. The names have either male or female ethnic background, and the names of the origins. So we take the data, but you know, organizations can take that base information, can improve, and then adjust those data points. But for the discussion, we have this. And then you look into the ethnic diversity, right? And we are pretty confident because we did run through our trained algorithms over 5 million data points. And consistently, we get about 80 to 90% accuracy of finding the gender information. And then ethnicity, we have right now trained for 4 these ethnic backgrounds: African American, Asian, Hispanic, and white. So again, all the data points we did with trained our algorithms for 5 million data points. We're pretty consistent in getting 70 to 75% of accuracy of the information. But imagine you have no data point prior to that, but having the 75% data accuracy gives you at an aggregate level at where we stand today, and that gives you, that helps you to make some very strategic decisions of improving your DEI goals. That's the important point. It's not about 100%, because unless you really go one by one, ask the information specific to which you cannot ask for it. So we're trying to solve the problem is, okay, what's an aggregate level mix of representation today, and we're trying to address that as a specific problem.
Yeah.
Then if you look into that, yeah.
Sorry, Samir, I didn't mean to interrupt, but when you talk about the compliance issue, really, we did have a question about that from Jamal actually, and I think it fits in quite well to now. About DE&I data management when collecting, storing, and what is the legal risk? So I think it's probably quite worthwhile mentioning that at this stage.
Yeah, no, it's actually a very valid question. Again, that's what I keep saying. It's an aggregate level data. So if you have the information, your HRO teams have employees.
Oops. Samir, I think we've lost you for a second there, unless I've gone a little bit deaf.
don't you don't see a specific information on each candidate level. That wasn't the goal here. The goal is to give you enough data point so that you could make a very strategic decision of improving those numbers moving forward. So, as long as we're not pinpointing a specific individual information, then we're not looking at it. We're looking into the aggregate data at an organization level or the department level or at a location-specific level information.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So then the compliance is a non-point, so thanks.
Right, exactly. And if we look into this, let's say in this case, like 28% female, and you would like to see, okay, what's the diversity among the female members here? And you can also get the information one level deep into it, how the female, diversity looks like in an organization like this. So you can get the very specifics about those 4 categories. And the same with male diversity combination. If you have, let's in this case, 72% male diversity in the organization, then how are they spread across at the difference? And you can see it very specifically. So in this case, if you look into the Hispanic Latino, 8%, or 72%, and the gender male diversity, there's something that, you look into that organization level, okay, we can do something better here because 72% of 8% is really a small percentage of it. So, and that's strategically you can make a call, and how can we improve bringing more Hispanic, Latino, male communities into the organization. So those kind of things that it's really helpful to you to make a very strategic decision into it, because it's the numbers, your data right here. You're not speaking about one specific or a set of individuals. You're talking about organizational level. That's why it's a legally non-specific, because we're very non-specific is not a specific point. So, and we're covered in that aspect of it, but this gives you a very specific data points where you want to make a call and how you want to put your efforts in improving those data points. And here is the supplier side of it is, right? And let's say, imagine if you have, as an MSP or corporate, have staffing suppliers working with them. And, you probably know that 20% of contingent workforce converted into full-time in the organizations within 12 to 18 months. Some industries have very high numbers, some industries have low numbers, but that's an average data. So it's also very important for corporates are looking into it. Who are my suppliers bringing the diverse set of candidates, because at the end of the day, those are the contingent workforce becomes a full-time workforce. If you don't have a good mix of diverse population bringing the contingent workforce, the more likely that you are not going to continue to meet your DEI goals, because obviously you don't have a very diverse population. So the corporations are extremely interested in looking into who are my diverse suppliers. In the past, if you are, it's also important, if you're a MD certified diverse supplier, and people used to say, okay, any business we do with them, that will be part of our diversity spend. Now corporations are looking into more a granular level, looking into it. How many of the candidates that are we getting from each supplier are a diverse or gender specific candidate? So, and then, it's a great way to measure staffing suppliers, to look at their database of prospective candidates and make an improvement. In fact, proactively give that data back to your MSPs or your direct customers. I think that would help you win more business and probably build more. You can build a greater relationship with your customers. Ultimately, can earn you more business. But if you look at this data, right, like large MSPs or large enterprises, if they have, you could have 100 suppliers. I'm just bringing up 5 suppliers. Like, let's say I take my top 5 suppliers. I wanted to see how they're doing in terms of the gender diversity. If I look into my supplier 5, it's great, right? It's doing great job. My supplier 4 is not so great. So I'll have a conversation with the supplier 4 and saying, how can we work together so that they can improve their contingent workforce candidates submitting to them are more diverse candidates. So it's a very meaningful, and again, it's a very aggregate level, but gives you a perspective of who would be their best diverse suppliers, not just on the status, like an MBA status, but really on the numbers side of it. So that you see more and more corporate and MSPs are looking into these data points.
Just a quick question we have quickly that's come through that's really based on here from Corinne. Can you give us a little bit more information about the performance here, placements, submittals? How are you getting this data?
Can you repeat again, Frank? Question?
Yeah, sure. So we had a question with regard to, how you grab this information really to provide on the supplier performance. Is it via placements or submittals? Could you give us a little bit more data on that?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for confirmation. Yeah. No, I think, you could create these data points across a number of candidates. Let's say, typically, let's say if you submit 10 candidates, we get one placement. I'm just throwing some numbers, right? Then you will look into it, okay, number of candidates you submitted, how many of those candidates are diverse candidates? And the candidates get placed at probably a lesser percentage of a larger population. So I think it's good to have, if you have a tool, a platform that can measure, give the data point, both the data points to your customers or MSPs. They would love it. More data is the better, right? But at least our recommendation is give it a submittal level, because when you're submitting a large number of candidates, let's say if you're attempting to 100 placements in a year, so 10 times is 1,000 candidates to submit. It's a good number, right? So give that information, at least showcase that, okay, what percentage of that 1,000 prospective candidates submitted to those 100 positions are diversified. So I think the more the data is, the better. So I would, you could use both of them, but again, if you have more the data points, the better.
Frank, can I just just add to that, because I know there was another question about, well, diversity, I'll kind of paraphrase this. The diversity gap in one part of the workforce may look different than the diversity gap in another part of the workforce, right? And this is, this is just part of the basic premises here, is that we have to be able to identify the different gaps within the workforce for any particular client. And so, these slides that Samir is going through are titled 10 diversity metrics that matter. These aren't all the diversity metrics, right? The AI algorithm, diversity algorithms are powerful, and the platform is powerful. There are all kinds of diversity metrics. So if you just think about what Samir is showing you, and then just kind of realize by extension, what else can we do here? If we can derive these metrics for the entire workforce, then of course we could derive them for any part of the workforce. We can find the gap in a department. We can find the gap in a location. We can analyze the gap between, as Samir talked about, submittals and hires. Because maybe it's really not just about lacking diverse candidates in the talent pool, but maybe it's also something about the process, right? So this can be used for, lots of actionable insights and in a lot of diagnostic ways as well. But first of all, just raising everyone's awareness.
Yeah, Jim, that's a great point. In fact, I didn't. Thanks for looking in the chart. Again, I want to just quickly address that piece. You could generate hundreds of a variety of metrics based on the information you feed into the algorithm. For an example, in this case, right, we're all talking about first name, last name, location. So if you can feed the data information about the employee's department, geographic location, if you have employee title name, if they have the pay grade, pay scale, like a pay range, if you have it, any of this information it feeds to the system, it gives you that granular level metrics data points. Absolutely not all. Like for an example, right? If you look into the, we see a lot of, we have seen in a lot of corporations, right? Typically, if you divide the type of jobs into 5 categories, right? we're talking about analyst or associate level. And then we look into manager level, look into director level, vice president level, and then executive level. Let's say keep it like 5 different cases. So if you look into that at an associate level, we see a pretty good mix of gender balance, right? But if you go to the manager level, that balance are more getting slightly imbalanced. But go to the director, VP, and executive level, we see a huge imbalance in the gender side of it. And the same with the diversity too. But how do you know unless you have the title information from the employee? So you could, I mean, we're only showing 10, but you could have 100 metrics to pay. Just take this in this case, right? Weighs the disparity by gender. All we need for this information is a pay range of an employee. If we know the pay range of an employee, we could see it how by aggregate male in males in organization to the aggregate females organizations, how they the pay range. In this case, 58 to 49,000. So why that parity? Just because maybe right when you look into that, maybe there are a lot more parity at associate level, but less parity at the managerial, VP, director, and so when you aggregate the data, you're pushing the average down for the female candidate. So that means maybe you want to solve that problem of bringing more qualified managerial, director, VP level candidates of the female candidates. So it gives you this directional thought for you, so where you can take an appropriate action to fix those problems and make your organization the more diverse, or you help your client to achieve their DEI goals. Same thing with wage disparity by ethnicity, right? You could collect this information by ethnic groups, and you can look into it. How can we, here in this case, African Americans, Hispanics are lower than other 2 categories. So maybe those ethnic groups are maybe at a junior level, but we don't have many at a senior level. So that's why their average is dropping down. So that's a data point you can take a look into and make a corrective actions. And the same thing with the role side of it, in also role equity by ethnicity. So you can do a lot of things can be done, because it's a data you're feeding into it. It gets the information out from those algorithms. So this is, we picked top 10 because of the limit of our time we have, but you could do a lot of things.
And I don't think we specifically said this, right? I mean, it's very sophisticated what can be done here. But, if I'm the staffing firm or the MSP, I still may be thinking, well, wait a minute, how am I going to collect all this data? Because it's been so difficult to do that in the past. Remember, for gender and ethnic diversity, it's just a name and location. To add role and pay equity, it's just a job title and a bill rate, a pay rate for a worker, right? And how do staffing firms and MSPs gather that information? It's literally the push of a button, right, in an ATS or an MSP. So we can do some really powerful things and make it really easy for staffing firms and MSPs to get started helping their clients.
Yeah, just to add a point to that, right? And if you have a prospective candidate database that you are using to support your clients, but if you have this data at aggregate level, well, here is how my prospective list of candidate data is spread. And let's say, a lot of times we will show you a couple of the public data points from large US corporations. They're very specific points. Okay, we want to improve 10% of African American female managers in this engineering division. So if you're working for, that's a high a point for the customer, really wants to improve that better, they probably go back and specifically ask for staffing firms. But MSP is looking, hey, I want a supplier who can help find engineers from the African American community or Hispanic community, right? So if you have the data point that showcase that I have a prospective list of database that we curated, or we have options to go after and find the talent, and you will have a better discussion across the table with the clients of the MSPs, that you could build a strong relationship. Eventually that might turn into a great business for you. But this is the data point that I think you can really work with you sitting side by side with your customers, the MSPs, and be part of that solution. And I think this would really helpful to you. You know, the plan 2 is really about, right, we look at the assessment reports. You can do any number of assessment reports. And then we would look into diversity, corporate diversity goals. What's our, I mean, every corporate, if you actually look into the, I will actually give you a couple of the URLs, just take a look at it, but it just Google it. You know, just Google is DEI reports for 2021 by your largest US corporation. Just Google that. You would find tons of information publicly putting that information on their corporate websites, right? Just look at one of those reports. You would see how important that information. So when you look at that goal and look into the data that you have it and just come up with a plan. So look at this one, right? Public DEI initiatives by largest corporations. We look into this too, Boeing and Deloitte. This 2021 Global DEI report, right? That I've given the URL names. This is a public information. You know, we're not sharing any information. This is just there. You could just click on it. It'll take you to the public website, right? So what they're talking about, like look at the Boeing by the year 2025 in their website saying increase Black representation rate by 20%. Okay. So we're talking about 2025. We're in 2021. It takes 4 years. That's what we would keep saying, you know, it's not like a quick fix of solving the problem. It's a process. We're setting it up so that you can work over time to improve your representation by a specific ethnicity or gender perspective, because imagine we're talking about tens of thousands of employees, moving the needle by 10% takes time. But at least you have the tools and process in place so that you can take the and go in the right direction. That means the process is just not their internal process. Process also involves, you know, who are their suppliers, who are their best diverse suppliers, and then how are they contributing to these goals, right? Suppose if somebody is working with Boeing and they have their corporate goal is 20% improve Black representation, but you have a good data point with you and you showcase it. Here is, you know, we understand your DI goals, and here we are a supplier for you. We're here to help you, and here is our database, and here is what we're making specific efforts to improve our curating of a very qualified database of African American candidates. So, you know, you have a best conversation across the table with the customer. Look at the Deloitte. It's a public URL we're talking about. There are very two specific points here talking about. Increase US workforce female representation to 45% by 2025. Very specific number. If you are a Deloitte supplier, if you are part of their MSP program, what a great way to have a conversation with them about these numbers and how we actually can help them to improve and or help them to solve their diversity goals. So I think these are kind of things that unless you have the tools and process in place, you will not have this conversation with them. And if you don't, your probably competitors will do that. Somebody else will do and get more business from these corporates.
I think it's worth mentioning at this stage as well, Samir, that, and I don't know if you agree, completely give your feedback, but when I've been speaking to our buyer clients as well, they're much more sophisticated now in the way they're approaching this. So they're looking, you know, they're not only looking as diverse suppliers becoming their main area for bringing in this candidates, but they're much interested more in the sourcing, you know, what societal effect are they having? What are they doing behind the scenes? What training are they providing? So it's not just about that one data point. They seem to be wanting much more data as well.
Absolutely, 100% agree on that, and that's why this data and stats would be helpful for staffing suppliers and MSPs to take this data, talk to the customers, and how you're really making that contribution towards their DI goals. And I want to actually go back and say, how do you build it, right? Just having this DI algorithm is not going to solve, it's just the problem. We have to have the process and the tools aligned towards that goal. So we'll spend a little bit of time just on that process. The step 3. Can we go back?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
got so many
So
questions
yeah.
and so many answers, so we'll
Yeah.
have to try and get to them a little bit later, or we'll reach out to you. So please don't worry, but do keep them coming through.
Yeah. So how do we implement, right? What's my options are here, right? So we would actually, this is, I'm telling you, this like 20,000 feet above the ground. We're talking about, but I'll just give you a quick synopsis of it, right? So every corporation has two sets of sources, internal sources and external sources of getting the talent. And looking at the talent are three categories, right? You have a full-time workforce, you have contingent workforce, and you have a diverse workforce that from both full-time and contingent workforce. The three types of categories, and you have two types of sources coming from. Your internal talent acquisition team bringing the talent. So what are the internal sources you have? Typical companies have, right? Their employee referrals, their own career portal, and they probably have their own subscribed job portals, specific job portals. And then they have their own recruitment team, the talent acquisition team. So they're all the internal, and then also they have curated databases they may have it already, right? Those are all internal talent sources. But how do we know which source is giving them the right mix of diverse or gender talent? We don't know, but there is a way you can measure that and give the feedback back to those sources so they can improve on top of it. I'll come back on that a little bit, right? So then external talent sources. What are the external talent sources? Staffing suppliers, MSPs, executive search firms. Then you have, freelance workers. They're all the external talent sources, right? So these two sides coming into the organization, end of the day, that's what it contributes, your total workforce. Your total workforce is full-time and contingent workforce. And then unless you measure what sources are bringing that talent, organizations have no way of identifying and making things improve. For an example, right, I'll take one micro level. A supplier are feeding or bringing 20% of the total workforce to the organization, right? Let's say organization has 10 suppliers, 10 tier 1 suppliers, bringing all the talent that required for the contingent workforce. So that 20% of the 20% end of the day becoming a full-time workforce, or the corporation wants to spend that 20% on the minority spend if they want to record that, right? But unless the staffing suppliers, they measure the way, how diversify their talent they're bringing into the organization, and they were never able to meet that goal of 20% contingent workforce staffing. So if we have a way to measure and bring that back to those suppliers saying that, okay, supplier 4 is doing great, supplier 1 is not meeting your goals, you can give you 3 more months time, you bring back, improve your, bringing a diverse talent to our workforce because that's part of our needs are, then you would continuously give that feedback to those suppliers and you make those suppliers do better. If somebody doesn't do well, maybe you have other suppliers are more diverse, talent that can bring into the organization. So organizations are looking into these ways. For an example, internal talent sources, right? Let's say if you have employee referrals, if you look at the data, employee referrals data, let's say 20% female candidates and 80% male candidates coming in. Maybe that's why looking why we have such a high percentage of male referrals coming in. Then you go back and talk to the focus groups, right? If you're a large corporation, you have Hispanic focus group, women focus groups, you have African American focus groups, Asian American focus groups. You go back to those focus groups and say, hey, we're looking for women managers in the technical roles or whatever the skill set you're looking for. Please help us to identify somebody in your, professional circles or friends or anyone. Bring those data points. So you're actually making a very specific effort to address those needs are, right? So how do you know that unless you have the data that tells you where the weakest spots are? And that's how this whole program works, right? Once you feed the data into the diversity algorithm, the data will get enriched and fill into your talent container with a single source. And then, which, like say for an example, on Ceipal, sits their search and ranking algorithm and gives the data reports of prospective candidates that fit for the specific jobs. If I actually go a couple peels down, can you go to the next slide, Fran? Yeah, so this is this is a patented technology. We are patent pending right now. So if you look into that, right, I talk about assessment of workload data, assessment of internal candidate, external candidate pool, goes to the algorithm, and it gives the gender and ethnic information. It goes to the talent candidate, pulls all the data into a highly indexed, searchable candidate database. And then this database is constantly measured against the diversity analytics. Like it talks about how well this talent pool is gender diversified or ethnic diversified. So then once you have that, and then you search the candidates and you get a qualified talent. Look, at the end of the day, you want to hire the candidates for the talent. But on top of that, you also need to do a better job of bringing the diverse talent. So you could actually meet both because you're constantly improving your talent container with this information. So that flows back to, becomes a contingent worker or at a full-time employee, and the whole process starts all over again. So that's what we're saying. It's not like a one-time fix. It's a continuous recurring process. Over a time, then you would get a better candidate pool that will help you to continue to make those numbers better. That's why if you look into these large corporations, why have they taken 4 years to meet their goals? Because it takes time to do that. It's a process. It's not a one-time fix solution. So that's what we were, we want to give you takeaway those 6 points, right? What are those key? Yeah.
I'm sorry. First of all, I just also want to mention we're seeing a lot more questions, right? And we had such a large number of people join, and they've all stayed on. So this is obviously very important to everyone. And we do want to let you know that we will, directly answer all of your individual questions as we're coming to a recap, because it's close to a close for us in the session. Before Samir gets to these 6 takeaways, what I want to say is this is a tremendous opportunity for MSPs and staffing firms. I think that the MSPs and staffing firms probably represent the largest percentage of people in the audience here. I think you already know this, right? Clients are looking for solutions, but you can't really get to the solution until you can identify and assess and evaluate the problem, like Samir has been talking about. Put a plan together for it. This gives you an opportunity to talk to your client and then actually implement that plan, right? And go on that journey together. There are probably a lot of diverse staffing firms on the call too, and supplier diversity hasn't gone away. It's still important, but clients want supplier diversity and workforce diversity, want to know that you can participate in this. The thing here is that you have an opportunity as an MSP to really differentiate yourself today. You have an opportunity as a staffing firm in what is an extremely competitive environment to differentiate yourself, to be a front runner, to get on the journey together with your clients and with the MSPs that you're working with now. And I think, Samir, you've got some takeaways to help staffing firms and MSPs do that.
Yeah, I want to just keep it very simple. You gotta, curating a diverse talent is not an easy task because obviously there's an opt-in option. So, there are DEI technology platforms and other AI automation platforms that you can get these stats in place and then constantly curate and measure your data points. And the second is building a diverse pool is a process, not a quick fix solution. That's the one thing I want to make sure, like you're not walking away with, okay, now I'm going to get one platform and going to solve my problem. That's not the case. My third point, you understand the DEI goals of your customer, right? And have a very candid conversation with them and just tell them that you want to be part of their solution. You want to be part of their DEI goals. And then you showcase them how you're going to do them, how you're going to work with them. I think you would going to build a long-lasting relationship, business relationship with the customers, and then you become a true partner for them. And also the fourth point is be proactive in sharing your candidate submission of the gender and ethnic information. You know, again, always remember that this is very aggregate level data, right? We're not talking about very specific individuals today. Never do that. And now you don't have access to it too. So when you said, okay, my pool today have 45% of women qualified candidates, it's a great data point. Have a conversation, prove it, right? And then you have, here's our reports, we have it. Here is how we're building it. Show them how you're actually constantly improving in that down. It's a great way to have a conversation with your customers and with their MSPs. And corporations are tracking diversity spend at a placement level. This is something that has changed in the past. It's more important now, the last 2 years, that, you know, placement level, not just the MSP supplier. You know, it's MSP suppliers are important, but at the same time, you have the more data points on a placement level. I think your relationship goes a long way. And the last point, Fran, if you go back.
Sorry, we're very aware that we're going to be running out of time very, very shortly.
Yeah,
so
partner with your MSP to build robust diversity pipeline. That's the last point.
Thank you so much. We've had so many questions and so much interaction, so we are delighted to have that. It's obviously a really important subject matter and people really want to get down to the nitty-gritty. So I will be passing on all the Q&A to Samir and his team. I'd like to thank you for, one, sponsoring, bringing this thought leadership webinar to our attention. And Samir and Jim, thank you very much for your expertise. And I thank everyone for listening.